Hey everyone, take a closer look at this Jefferson nickel, because what seems like ordinary pocket change can reveal some surprisingly rare details that serious collectors know to watch for. Step 1. There is something deceptively ordinary about a 1954 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, it is simply a 5-cent coin from an era when American pocket change looked very different from today. But turn it over, study the mint mark, inspect the steps of Monticello, examine the surfaces under magnification, and the story becomes much more complicated. The 1954 issue sits at an interesting point in Jefferson nickel history, with substantial production, several mint locations, important die varieties, and a small number of exceptional pieces that command serious collector attention. Later, we will look at documented auction results for authenticated examples and examine why one 1954 nickel can remain a modest collectible, while another can become a four-figure numismatic prize. The important question is not simply whether a nickel is old. It is what happened to that particular coin after it left the United States Mint, and how much of its original quality survived. The year 1954 itself provides an important backdrop. America was moving through the early Cold War. The Korean War had ended the previous year, and the nation was entering a period of expanding consumer production, suburban growth, and rising prosperity. The nickel was still a practical denomination used constantly in vending machines, public transportation, stores, and everyday commerce. Jefferson nickels were already familiar to Americans because the design had been introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel after a long and sometimes difficult transition. By 1954, the design was no longer experimental. It was an established part of American commerce. That familiarity is one reason enormous numbers were produced, but it also explains why so many were subjected to years of handling, abrasion, pocket wear, and environmental exposure. A coin could be common when it was made and still become surprisingly scarce in exceptional condition decades later. The 1954 Jefferson nickel was produced at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and the mint mark can fundamentally change the collector's interpretation of the coin. Philadelphia struck 47,684,050 examples and used no mint mark, while Denver produced 117,183,060 pieces carrying a D, and San Francisco produced 29,384,000 carrying an S. Those figures immediately reveal an important point. The San Francisco issue had the smallest reported mintage among the three regular strike 1954 versions. Yet mintage alone does not establish rarity. Millions of coins can survive from a comparatively small production run, while a much larger issue can become difficult in a particular grade or with a particular strike characteristic. PCGS lists the Philadelphia issue's auction record at $805 for an MS-67 example, while the much more heavily produced Denver issue has reached $932 for an MS-66 example. Physically, this is a classic mid-century Jefferson nickel. The coin weighs 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. Its metal is a durable alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel, a composition that gives the coin its familiar silvery appearance while distinguishing it from the silver alloy nickels temporarily produced during World War II. That distinction matters because collectors sometimes encounter old nickels that appear unusual in color or surface texture and immediately assume they contain precious metal. A normal 1954 Jefferson nickel is not one of the wartime silver nickels. Its value, therefore, comes from numismatic characteristics rather than silver content. The alloy was designed for durability, but decades of circulation could still flatten Jefferson's portrait, soften lettering, damage Monticello's architectural detail, and leave countless contact marks across the fields. The artistic identity of the coin belongs to Felix Schlag, whose Jefferson nickel design became one of the most recognizable American coin designs of the 20th century. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson faces left, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date surrounding the portrait. On the reverse stands Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, with United States of America above and 5 cents, and the denomination lettering below. EPLURIBUSUNUM appears along the upper portion of the reverse. What makes the reverse especially important to collectors is not merely the building itself, but the horizontal steps beneath Monticello. Those steps became one of the most closely watched areas in the entire Jefferson Nickel series, because exceptionally sharp examples can receive the coveted full steps designation. A coin may have brilliant surfaces and strong lettering yet fail to qualify because contact marks, weakness, or incomplete detail interrupt the steps. That brings us to one of the central mysteries of the 1954 nickel. Why can two coins with exactly the same date and mint mark have dramatically different values? The answer begins with grade. A heavily circulated example might show obvious wear on Jefferson's cheek, hair, jaw, and coat, along with flattened details on Monticello. Such a coin may have historical charm, but generally attracts far less money than an uncirculated specimen. As the grade rises through the mint state range, tiny distinctions become increasingly important. An MS-60 coin can technically have no circulation wear while still displaying numerous marks, dull luster, or weak eye appeal. An MS-63 can look considerably cleaner, while MS-65 demands a much stronger overall combination of preservation, luster, strike, and surfaces. At the highest levels, a single grade point difference can represent an enormous difference in scarcity. For collectors, strike quality is particularly important with Jefferson nickels because the design contains areas that did not always receive complete pressure during production. The steps of Monticello are the classic example. When the dies and planchet interact under enormous pressure, metal flows into the recessed portions of the die, but variations in die condition, pressure, alignment, and planchet characteristics can prevent every detail from appearing sharply. A full steps designation generally indicates that the steps are sufficiently complete and uninterrupted to meet the grading services criteria. This creates a second layer of rarity beyond the basic grade. A 1954 nickel in MS-66 may be desirable, but a similarly graded coin with exceptionally complete steps can attract a very different level of collector competition. The market is therefore not simply paying for age, it is paying for preservation plus technical quality. The San Francisco issue illustrates this phenomenon dramatically. Although 29,384,000 regular strike examples were made, PCGS records an authenticated MS-66 San Francisco nickel selling for $480 in a November 2025 Stack's Bowers auction, while a high-quality full steps example can move into a completely different category. PCGS records a 1954 MS-67 full steps example selling for $35,250 at Legend Rare Coin Auctions in July 2020. That extraordinary result should never be interpreted as meaning an ordinary 1954 nickel is worth anywhere near that amount. It represents an exceptional combination of grade, strike quality, certification, and collector demand. The enormous gap between ordinary pieces and elite full-step specimens is precisely what makes this series fascinating. Rarity often exists inside the grade, not merely inside the date. The Denver issue tells a similar but slightly different story. More than 117 million 1954 D nickels were produced, making it the largest of the 3 regular issues for that year. In circulated grades, that large production means examples are generally not difficult to locate, but high-grade preservation changes the equation. PCGS estimates roughly 25,600 1954 D examples survive at MS-65 or better, compared with an estimated 93 million surviving across all grades. More importantly, a full-step specimen can become substantially more competitive. One authenticated 1954 D MS-66 full steps example brought $9,694 at Legend Rare Coin Auctions in December 2020. Again, that is an elite result, not a blanket valuation for the date. A normal circulated 1954D and a certified top-quality full-step specimen are effectively different markets even though both carry the same date and mint mark. Then there are the varieties that make the 1954 series especially interesting to specialists. The Denver issue includes a documented D/D repunched mint mark variety, identified by PCGS as FS501. A repunched mint mark occurred when a mint mark was applied to the die, and then another impression was made in a different position, leaving traces of the earlier placement. These details can be extremely subtle on worn coins, which is why attribution should never be based on a vague resemblance or an enlarged photograph alone. PCGS records an authenticated MS65 example of the 1954 DD-FS5, one selling for $825 in 2021. Another example, graded MS63, sold for $286. Those results show how a genuine variety can create additional collector interest, but they also demonstrate that the variety itself does not automatically produce a fortune. Grade, visibility, certification, and demand remain critical. Perhaps the most famous variety associated with the 1954 nickel is the 1954 S/D, where traces of a D mint mark appear beneath the S. This is exactly the kind of feature that can cause confusion because normal mint mark shapes, die deterioration, scratches, and postmint damage can imitate variety characteristics. The genuine variety must match recognized diagnostics rather than simply look unusual. Authenticated examples have traded at a wide range of prices depending on grade and certification. PCGS auction records show an MS65 example selling for $168 in 2024, an MS66 example bringing $660 in 2024, and another MS66 example selling for $558.13 in an earlier heritage auction. These numbers provide a useful lesson. Even when a variety is genuinely scarce, the market can place different values on individual specimens because condition and competition at the time of sale matter. Authentication becomes especially important once a 1954 nickel appears valuable. A collector should begin with simple physical checks: diameter, weight, edge, overall design, and the correct relationship between lettering and devices. But measurements alone cannot authenticate a sophisticated counterfeit. Professional grading services examine die characteristics, surface composition, strike behavior, tooling marks, altered mint marks, and other indicators that may not be obvious to the naked eye. This matters particularly for varieties because counterfeiters can manipulate mint marks or damage a coin to create the appearance of a scarce error. A genuine 1954 SD should not be declared authentic simply because the mint mark looks like an S sitting over something underneath it. The safest approach for a potentially significant discovery is comparison with recognized variety diagnostics followed, when warranted, by examination from an established professional grading and authentication service. Condition should also be judged without trying to improve the coin. Cleaning is one of the most damaging mistakes an inexperienced collector can make. Abrasive rubbing can remove original surface texture, create hairline scratches, and leave an unnatural appearance that professional graders recognize immediately. Chemical treatments can produce their own problems, particularly if they disturb the original surface or leave residues. A valuable nickel should generally be handled by its edges, preferably over a clean, soft surface, and examined under good lighting rather than aggressively polished. Storage is equally important. A non-reactive holder or professionally graded holder can reduce unnecessary contact, while stable temperature and humidity help limit environmental damage. The objective is not to make the coin look newer. It is to preserve whatever originality and surface quality remain. Color can also influence appearance and desirability, but Jefferson nickels are not generally assigned the same brown, and red classifications commonly used for copper cents. Nickel alloy surfaces may develop gray, golden, bluish, or other forms of natural tunning depending on their storage environment and history. Attractive original tunning can enhance eye appeal for some collectors, while dark spots, corrosion, fingerprints, or unnatural discoloration can hurt desirability. This is another reason photographs can be deceptive. A coin may look brilliant under intense lighting while hiding hairlines or surface disturbances, and a dark-looking coin may reveal attractive original luster when viewed correctly. Serious valuation therefore depends on the physical coin, not simply on a dramatic photograph or an online claim about a supposedly rare nickel. Auction history gives us the clearest window into how the market actually behaves. For a standard Philadelphia 1954 nickel, PCGS records an MS66 auction result of $125 in 2016, while another MS66 sold for $60 in 2017, illustrating how ordinary high-grade examples can remain relatively affordable. A superb MS67 Philadelphia specimen reached $805 in 2008, demonstrating the premium attached to the upper end of preservation. These results are not guarantees of present-day value, because auction prices change with market conditions, buyer competition, certification populations, and the individual coin's appearance. But they establish a realistic pattern. A 1954 nickel can move from a modest collectible to a four-figure level object when exceptional quality, rarity, or a recognized variety brings serious specialists into competition. For someone evaluating a 1954 Jefferson nickel today, the most important checklist is therefore remarkably practical. First, identify the mint. No mint mark indicates Philadelphia, while D indicates Denver and S indicates San Francisco. Next, determine whether the coin shows circulation where or qualifies for consideration as mint state. Then inspect Monticello, especially the steps, because strong detail can transform the coin's desirability. Examine the mint mark carefully for recognized repunched or over mint mark varieties, but do not confuse damage with a genuine die variety. Look for original luster, avoid clean surfaces, and check for major mint errors such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, doubled design elements, or other abnormalities. But remember that a strange-looking coin is not automatically an error. If the potential value rises into the hundreds or thousands, professional attribution and authentication become increasingly sensible. The remarkable thing about the 1954 Jefferson nickel is that its story is ultimately about survival. Tens of millions entered American commerce, and people spent them without imagining that future collectors would scrutinize the smallest details of their surfaces. Most were worn, scratched, stained, or simply lost. A smaller number survived in better condition, and an even smaller fraction preserved unusually sharp strikes, pristine surfaces, complete Monticello steps, or recognizable die varieties. That process created a hierarchy inside an apparently common coin. A circulated specimen may be primarily a historical keepsake. A strong mint state example may be a worthwhile collection piece. A certified full steps coin or authenticated variety can become a serious numismatic acquisition. In exceptional cases, the difference is not cosmetic. It is the difference between an ordinary survivor and a genuinely scarce survivor. And that is where the real collector value of the 1954 Jefferson nickel emerges. The date alone does not make it rare, and the fact that the coin is more than 70 years old does not automatically make it expensive. Its value is created by the combination of authenticity, mint mark, grade, strike quality, surface preservation, recognized varieties, eye appeal, and the willingness of collectors to compete for the exact specimen in front of them. The documented auction record of $35,250 for an extraordinary 1954 S full steps MS67 proves that exceptional examples can reach far beyond the normal range. while ordinary certified pieces can sell for tens or hundreds of dollars and specialized varieties can occupy the middle ground. The lesson is simple but powerful. When you encounter a 1954 Jefferson nickel, don't ask only what the date says. Ask what the coin itself is telling you. Its surfaces, its strike, its mint mark, and its preservation may reveal a far more interesting story than 5 cents ever could. Step 2. There is a deceptive simplicity to the 1963 Jefferson nickel. Millions were struck, millions entered American commerce, and most surviving examples are still easy enough to recognize as ordinary pocket change. Yet within that enormous population is a much smaller world of exceptional preservation, sharp strikes, full steps reverses, proof finishes, and documented die varieties that can turn an otherwise familiar 5-cent piece into a serious numismatic collectible. The 1963 issue is especially interesting because it was produced during the final years of the original pre-1965 Jefferson nickel era, just before the United States entered a period of extraordinary coin production pressure and eventually removed mint marks from circulating coins. Philadelphia and Denver produced hundreds of millions of circulation nickels, while Philadelphia also struck a separate proof issue for collectors. Later, we will examine authenticated auction results and see why some examples have reached four-figure territory while ordinary circulated pieces remain inexpensive. The important mystery is not simply how old a 1963 nickel is, but which version you have, how well it was struck, how carefully it survived, whether its surfaces remain original, and whether collectors recognize something genuinely scarce hiding inside an apparently common coin. To understand why the 1963 Jefferson nickel matters, it helps to place it inside the America that produced it. The country was in the final years of the Kennedy administration. The Cold War remained a defining force in American politics, and the economy was experiencing significant growth after the recession of 1960-61. The United States was becoming increasingly dependent on vending machines, automobiles, mass retail, and a rapidly expanding consumer economy, all of which generated enormous demand for everyday coinage. The nickel was still a working denomination, not merely a collector's object, and it moved constantly through cash registers, laundromats, transit systems, restaurants, and vending equipment. Jefferson himself had been chosen for the 5-cent denomination because of his importance to the nation's political and intellectual history, while Felix Schlage's portrait and Monticello reverse had become familiar symbols of American coinage since 1938. By 1963, the design was 25 years old, but its basic appearance remained remarkably stable. The Philadelphia circulation issue carried no mint mark, while Denver placed a D to identify its production. There was no regular 1963 S circulation nickel. San Francisco's role in the series had changed after its last circulating Jefferson nickels of the 1950s, while proof production for 1963 took place at Philadelphia. The regular Philadelphia mintage was 175,784,000, according to PCGS, and Denver produced an even larger 276,829,460, giving the two circulation issues a combined production of more than 452 million pieces. A separate 3,075,645 proof nickels were also made at Philadelphia. Physically, the 1963 Jefferson nickel is a classic copper-nickel 5-cent piece, 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighing 5 grams, measuring 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and carrying a plain edge. Those specifications are useful not only for identifying the coin, but also for detecting potential alterations or counterfeits. The obverse presents Thomas Jefferson facing left, surrounded by Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date. On the reverse, Monticello dominates the center, with United States of America above and 5 cents below, while EPLURIBUS UNUM occupies the upper portion. The building is more than decoration. Monticello connects the coin to Jefferson's Virginia home and his architectural interests, while the surrounding inscriptions reinforce the coin's national identity and denomination. But the most important region for specialists may be the six-step architectural structure beneath Monticello. Jefferson nickels from this era were frequently struck with varying degrees of weakness, and the steps could fail to appear completely because of die condition, spacing, striking pressure, and the enormous production demands placed on the mint. Collectors eventually developed a special premium for coins displaying 5 or 6 uninterrupted steps, generally referred to as full steps or FS. That distinction can transform the economics of the coin. A normal mint state specimen may be attractive without being especially rare, while a top-grade example with exceptionally sharp steps can become dramatically harder to locate. The coin's luster matters as well. Original mint brilliance can reveal whether the surfaces have remained untouched, while dullness, hairlines, spots, or unnatural polishing can reduce desirability even when the numerical grade appears impressive. Unlike copper cents, Jefferson nickels are not normally classified with the familiar brown, and red color designations. Instead, collectors concentrate on originality, luster, tunning, surface quality, and overall eye appeal. That is where the 1963 nickel becomes much more complicated than its mintage figures suggest. A population of hundreds of millions does not mean hundreds of millions of high-grade survivors. PCGS estimates roughly 140 million Philadelphia examples survive across all grades, but only about 195,000 at MS60 or better, and approximately 85,000 at MS65 or better. For the Denver issue, PCGS estimates about 221 million survivors overall, roughly 110,000 at MS60 or better, and approximately 25,000 at MS65 or better. Those are estimates rather than exact census counts, because many coins remain uncertified, but they demonstrate the basic principle of condition rarity. A coin that was plentiful in 1963 can become surprisingly scarce once collectors demand near-perfect preservation. PCGS records a Philadelphia 1963 nickel reaching $3,408 at MS67 plus in a Legend Rare Coin auction sale in March 2019, while a certified MS67 Full Steps Philadelphia example reached $3,600 at Heritage Auctions in February 2020. The Denver issue has also produced significant results, with an authenticated MS66 Plus example selling for $1,320 through Heritage in December 2019. These are not normal prices for the date. They belong to exceptionally preserved certified coins, and the difference between a $1,000 plus specimen and an ordinary nickel is enormous. A circulated 1963 nickel can remain close to face value, while a high-grade coin may attract serious competition, because the market is paying for the survival of original surfaces and sharp design detail, rather than simply paying for the number 1963. The variety side of the story adds another layer of investigation. PCGS recognizes a 1963 Philadelphia triple die reverse variety, identified as FS801, a specialized attribution that is far more meaningful than simply noticing something unusual on the reverse. The documented variety has an auction record of $277 for an MS64 example sold by Great Collections in 2014, demonstrating that a genuine die variety can create a premium even when the coin is nowhere near the finest known grade. Meanwhile, 1963 proof nickels open a separate collecting category. Proofs were specially prepared for collectors rather than struck for ordinary circulation, and the 1963 proof mintage was 3,075,645. PCGS recognizes standard, cameo, and deep cameo classifications for these pieces, reflecting differences in the contrast between frosted design elements and mirrored fields. The recorded auction history includes a $978 result for a PR 1963 proof nickel at Heritage in April 2012. Again, that result must be understood in context. It does not mean a normal 1963 nickel is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. A proof, a circulation strike, a full-step specimen, and a documented die variety are separate collectible categories, and each has its own supply and demand. Authentication becomes critical when a coin appears unusual. Collectors should compare suspected varieties against established diagnostics rather than relying on photographs or enlarged digital images, and they should be cautious of altered mint marks, artificial doubling, polishing, plating, and other forms of post-mint manipulation. A genuine doubled die or die variety is created during the die-making process and leaves repeatable characteristics. Random scratches, machine doubling, or damage occurring after the coin leaves the mint do not automatically qualify. Ultimately, the 1963 Jefferson Nickel teaches one of the most important lessons in American numismatics. Rarity is often found not in how many coins were made, but in how few survived with the exact combination collectors want. The ordinary 1963P or 1963D nickel that's circulated for decades may show flattened details, contact marks, scratches, and dull surfaces, and today such a piece generally has little premium beyond its historical interest. At the other end of the spectrum, a professionally authenticated MS-65, MS-66, or MS-67 coin with outstanding luster, minimal marks, strong strike definition, and full steps can enter a completely different market. The 1963P MS-67 Plus record of $3,408 and the $3,600 full steps result demonstrate how far exceptional specimens can rise, while the $1,320 Denver MS-66 Plus sale shows that high-grade examples from a much larger mintage can also attract substantial competition. Proofs and recognized varieties create additional opportunities, but none should be treated as automatic jackpots. The safest way to evaluate one is to begin with the mint mark, weight, diameter, edge, and overall design. Then examine the surfaces and Monticello steps under good lighting. Never clean the coin, because abrasive or chemical treatment can permanently damage its original surfaces and reduce collector appeal. Store it in a stable, inert holder, handle it by the edges, and avoid humid or chemically reactive environments. If the coin appears to possess an important variety, dramatic mint error, unusually high grade, or exceptional preservation, professional authentication and grading can provide a much stronger foundation for valuation. In the end, the 1963 Jefferson Nickel is valuable precisely because it rewards careful observation. More than 400 million circulation pieces were struck, yet the market continues to compete for the tiny fraction that escaped wear, weak strikes, surface damage, and decades of careless handling. That is the real story behind this coin. Not that every 1963 nickel is rare, but that within an enormous population, a remarkably small number survived as truly exceptional representatives of the year. And when collectors encounter those survivors, 5 cents can become a piece of American numismatic history worth far more than the denomination stamped on its face. Step 3. A 1977 Jefferson nickel can look almost too ordinary to deserve a second glance, yet experienced collectors know that this is exactly the kind of coin that rewards patience. Hold one under a strong light and the investigation changes. The date becomes the first clue, the mint mark becomes the next, and then the eye moves toward Jefferson's portrait, the lettering, the fields, and finally the tiny architectural steps beneath Monticello. Most 1977 nickels were made in enormous quantities and spent years moving through American commerce, but a much smaller population survived with the combination of sharp detail, clean surfaces, original luster, and exceptional preservation that advanced collectors pursue. The 1977 issue is also interesting because Philadelphia and Denver produced regular circulation strikes, while San Francisco produced proof examples for collectors, creating several distinct paths through the same year's coinage. Later in this investigation, the difference between an ordinary survivor and an elite certified specimen becomes clear, including what authenticated examples have actually brought at auction and why certain pieces have attracted serious competition. The mystery is not simply whether a 1977 nickel is old enough to be collectible. It is whether the individual coin in front of us possesses the precise characteristics that make modern Jefferson nickels scarce at the highest levels. The first clue is the year itself. In 1977, America was emerging from the economic turbulence of the 1970s, dealing with inflation, energy concerns, changing consumer habits, and the aftermath of the 1973-74 economic downturn. Jimmy Carter had entered the White House. The Cold War remained a major international reality, and the country was experiencing a rapidly changing industrial and technological landscape. Through all of this, the 5-cent piece remained a workhorse denomination, used in everyday transactions and handled constantly by the public. The Jefferson nickel design had already been part of American life for nearly 4 decades. Felix Schlage's portrait of Thomas Jefferson appeared on the obverse, with Liberty, the date, and In God W.E. Trust surrounding the central portrait. The reverse presented Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate, accompanied by United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and 5 cents. The architecture was especially important because the steps beneath Monticello became one of the most closely examined areas in the entire Jefferson nickel series. For 1977, Philadelphia struck 585,376,000 circulation nickels without a mint mark, while Denver produced 297,313,422, carrying the D. San Francisco produced 3,251,152, proof nickels bearing the S. These numbers immediately tell us something important. None of these issues should be called rare merely because of its mintage. The Philadelphia and Denver coins were produced in enormous numbers, and even the proof issue had millions made. The real scarcity develops later when we separate coins by condition, strike quality, surface preservation, and collector demand. PCGS.com https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/1977-5c/4098/66 Udum source equals chat.com. Now examine the coin as if it were evidence on a collector's workbench. A normal 1977 Jefferson nickel weighs 5 grams, measures 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge. Its composition is 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving the coin its familiar pale metallic appearance. That specification is useful when authenticity is questioned, because a dramatically incorrect weight, diameter, or edge can be an immediate warning sign, although normal tolerance and scale accuracy must always be considered. The production process began with copper-nickel planchets that were prepared and then struck between dies under enormous pressure. In theory, that process should transfer the entire design sharply onto the blank, but real-world production is never perfectly uniform. Die wear, striking pressure, planchet positioning, die alignment, and the speed of production could all affect the final appearance. This is why collectors inspect the coin's luster before they become distracted by supposed errors. Original mint luster should flow naturally across the fields when the coin is tilted beneath light. A circulated example will usually show wear first on the highest points of Jefferson's hair and cheek, while the reverse can reveal wear through the architectural details of Monticello and the lettering. A mint state coin, by contrast, has no evidence of circulation wear, although it can still possess numerous contact marks from the production and distribution process. MS-60 is the lower end of the uncirculated scale, while progressively higher grades require increasingly impressive surfaces, luster, strike, and eye appeal. A 1977 nickel can therefore be technically uncirculated without being remotely close to the finest examples collectors seek. And this is where the 1977 issue becomes genuinely fascinating. PCGS notes that the Philadelphia 1977 Jefferson nickel did not generally come well struck, with even MS-65 examples considered scarce and MS-66 pieces difficult to locate. Full steps examples are described as scarce in any condition. The Denver issue is somewhat different. Examples through approximately MS-65 are more readily encountered, but MS-66 becomes much scarcer and MS-67 or higher is rare. The full steps designation can create an entirely separate level of demand because it indicates that the steps beneath Monticello are sufficiently complete according to the grading services criteria. Look closely, and you can understand why. Those narrow horizontal lines occupy a small area of the reverse, and even minor weakness or contact can interrupt them. A collector searching for a top-quality 1977 nickel is therefore not merely asking, "Is this coin shiny?" The questions become much more precise. Are the steps complete? Are the fields free from distracting marks? Is the luster original? Does Jefferson's portrait show strong definition? Are the rims clean? Is the lettering sharp? Does the coin have attractive, natural color rather than an artificially brightened appearance? Modern Jefferson nickels are generally not assigned the brown, and red color categories used for copper cents, so nickel collectors focus instead on originality, tunning, luster, surface quality, and eye appeal. The difference in market behavior becomes obvious in documented sales. A standard 1977 Philadelphia nickel has a recorded PCGS auction result of $1,725 for an MS-63 example, but that result should not be treated as a normal valuation for the date. Exceptional auction records can reflect an unusual coin, an unusual market moment, or a particularly desirable combination of characteristics. More revealing is the certified 1977 Philadelphia MS 67 full steps example recorded by PCGS at $4,495 in 2019, when it was described as population 1 with none graded higher at the time. That is the kind of result that demonstrates condition rarity rather than ordinary date rarity. PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/977-5c/4098/66 Udom source equals checked. Com, PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/auction prices/items/1977-5 CFS/80 4098/2 quintillion 765 quadrillion 640 5 trillion 880 billion 55 million 430 1340 Udom source equals check. Com. The Denver coin gives us another important case study. Nearly 297.3 million were struck, so a collector should not assume that a 1977 D found in circulation is automatically scarce. Yet PCGS records a 1977 D full steps MS-67 auction record of $4,320 at Stack's Bowers in August 2021. That dramatic number belongs to an authenticated, exceptionally high-grade full steps example, not to every nickel carrying a D beneath the date. PCGS's data also show the broader issue as common in many grades, with the real difficulty appearing at the upper end. This distinction is crucial when evaluating possible mint errors or varieties. The internet is full of photographs of coins displaying strange lines, doubling, raised lumps, or distorted letters, but not every unusual mark was created at the mint. Genuine errors must be distinguished from damage, machine doubling, die deterioration, plating problems, scratches, and postmint alterations. The same caution applies to counterfeit or altered coins. A fake mint mark, manipulated surface, or artificially enhanced coin can look convincing in a photograph, which is why high-value claims should be supported by physical examination and, when appropriate, professional authentication. For a 1977 nickel, there is no justification for inventing a rare variety simply because something appears unusual. A legitimate attribution must match recognized diagnostics and be consistent with the manufacturing process. The San Francisco proof issue adds another dimension. Its 3,251,152 pieces were made specifically for collectors, with specially prepared dies and polished planchets producing the reflective proof fields associated with the format. Proof coins can receive cameo or deep cameo designations when the contrast between frosted devices and mirrored fields is strong enough. PCGS reports that most 1977 S proofs are found in excellent condition around PR69 deep cameo, while perfect PR70 deep cameo examples are considerably scarcer. A documented 1977 SPR70 example reached $1,840 at Heritage Auctions in 2007, providing another reminder that four-figure results can exist, but only within a very specific grade and proof category. PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/1977/CFS/84099/67 Udom source equals chat.com, PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/1977s5cdcam/94210/69 Udom source equals chat.com. The final step in examining a 1977 Jefferson nickel is learning how not to damage the evidence. If the coin has potential, do not polish it, scrub it, dip it in household chemicals, or attempt to make the surfaces look brighter. Cleaning can leave hairlines and unnatural surfaces that permanently reduce collector appeal. Instead, hold the coin by its edges and examine it over a soft, clean surface under controlled lighting. A magnifier can help reveal contact marks and the Monticello steps, but magnification should be used to observe rather than to manufacture a theory about an error. If the coin is stored raw, an inert holder designed for long-term coin storage is preferable to materials that may react with the metal. Avoid excessive humidity, heat, and chemical exposure, and keep fingerprints away from the fields because oils can leave permanent spots. If a 1977 nickel appears to be in extraordinary condition, has complete full steps, shows a potentially legitimate mint error, or appears to match a recognized variety, professional grading and authentication can become worthwhile. The market for these coins is driven by a simple principle. Collectors compete most intensely when rarity and quality intersect. A worn 1977 nickel can be historically interesting, but usually carries little premium. A certified MS65 or MS66 with strong eye appeal can be substantially more desirable, and a truly exceptional full-step specimen can reach the $3,000 to $4,000 range or beyond when certification, population rarity, originality, and competitive bidding align. The documented $4,495 Philadelphia full-step sale and $4,320 Denver full-step sale prove that the upper end can be remarkable, but they should never be used to imply that every 1977 nickel is valuable. What makes this issue worth studying is precisely the contrast between its enormous production and the difficulty of finding the very best survivors. More than 500 million regular circulation pieces were produced between Philadelphia and Denver, yet the coins that command the strongest attention are those that escape the damage of machines, pockets, bags, commerce, and decades of handling, while retaining exceptional strike and surfaces. That is why an experienced collector does not stop at the date. The investigation continues through the mint mark, weight, edge, portrait, lettering, luster, color, and toning, Monticello steps, possible errors, and overall eye appeal. The 1977 Jefferson Nickel is not a treasure simply because it carries an old date. It becomes significant when the physical evidence proves that a particular survivor is unusually well preserved, unusually well struck, genuinely different, or exceptionally scarce within its grade. And that distinction between a common coin and an extraordinary survivor is the real foundation of its long-term collectability. PCGS, COM. Step 4. The 1996 D Jefferson Nickel is the kind of coin most people would spend without a second thought. Yet under magnification it can become a surprisingly detailed numismatic investigation. The date looks ordinary, the Denver D looks ordinary, and the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson gives no immediate warning that collectors might separate one example from another with extraordinary precision. But that is exactly where the story begins. More than 817 million Jefferson nickels were struck at Denver in 1996, so this is not a coin that can honestly be called rare simply because of its age or mint mark. What interests specialists is the much smaller population that survived with exceptional surfaces, strong original luster, unusually sharp detail, and especially complete Monticello steps. The 1996 D also belongs to a period when modern Jefferson nickels were increasingly being saved by collectors, meaning that the question of rarity becomes less about survival in general and more about survival at the very highest levels of quality. As we examine this coin more closely, the important clues begin to separate themselves. The mint mark, the strike, the fields, the lettering, Jefferson's portrait, and the reverse architecture. Later, we will examine verified auction evidence and see why the market can treat an ordinary example very differently from a professionally authenticated full-step specimen. The fascinating part is that the difference is not hidden in some mysterious legend about the coin. It is sitting directly on the metal, waiting to be recognized by someone who knows exactly where to look. To understand why the 1996 D exists in such enormous numbers, we have to step into America of the mid-1990s. The United States was enjoying strong economic expansion. Unemployment was relatively low, consumer spending was robust, and the country was moving rapidly into the digital age. Personal computers and the emerging internet were changing everyday life, while traditional cash transactions remained enormously important. 5-cent pieces were still needed for vending machines, stores, transportation, and countless small purchases, so the Denver Mint continued producing Jefferson nickels on a massive scale. The 1996 D was part of that ordinary economic machinery. Its 817,736,000 piece mintage makes clear that Denver was not producing a scarce commemorative object. It was manufacturing a practical circulating coin. The Jefferson design itself was created by Felix Schlag and had been in production since 1938. On the obverse, Jefferson faces left, surrounded by Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date. The reverse presents Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, with United States of America, EPLURIBUS UNUM, and 5 cents surrounding the building. The design connects the denomination to Jefferson not only as a president, but as a statesman, thinker, architect, and advocate of American Republican ideals. The physical specifications remained familiar. The coin weighs 5 grams, measures 21.2 millimeters, has a plain edge, and consists of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The Denver mint mark, the small d beneath the date on the obverse, is therefore one of the first things an investigator should verify. It identifies the facility responsible for the strike, but it does not by itself establish rarity. A genuine 1996 D is common. An unusually well-preserved 1996 D is where the investigation becomes more interesting. Now imagine placing the coin beneath a lamp and slowly tilting it from side to side. Before searching for an error, an experienced collector studies the way the light travels across the surface. Original mint luster should move naturally across the fields rather than appearing flat, cloudy, or artificially bright. Next comes the portrait. Jefferson's cheek, jaw, hair, and coat can reveal whether the coin experienced actual circulation, while small contact marks can distinguish an attractive mint state piece from one that has endured too much handling. A coin graded mint state has no circulation wear, but that does not mean every mint state coin is equally desirable. MS-60 can contain substantial marks and distractions, while higher grades demand progressively stronger surfaces, luster, strike quality, and eye appeal. The reverse then becomes the real test. Look beneath Monticello. Those horizontal architectural steps are among the most valuable pieces of information on a Jefferson nickel. If they are incomplete because of strike weakness, contact marks, or die characteristics, the coin may fail to receive the coveted full steps designation. If the steps are exceptionally complete and the rest of the coin is equally strong, the collector audience becomes much more specialized. This is the reason a coin with an enormous mintage can still become conditionally scarce. PCGS's data for the 1996D show the ordinary issue as abundant overall, while the full steps designation creates a separate collecting category. The distinction is so important that PCGS maintains a separate 1996 D5C full steps listing with its own population and auction history. In other words, the market is not simply asking how many 1996 D nickels were made. It is asking how many survived that look like this. That question transforms the coin from a mass-produced object into a competition over quality. The auction record gives us a useful reality check, because it prevents the story from drifting into exaggerated claims. For the standard 1996 D Jefferson nickel, PCGS records an auction result of $184 for an MS-63 example sold by Heritage Auctions on September 11, 2009. That is a legitimate certified result, but it also demonstrates why collectors should be skeptical when someone claims that every 1996 D nickel is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The full steps category tells a more specialized story. PCGS records an auction record of $805 for a certified 1996 D full steps MS 65 example sold by Heritage Auctions in December 2004. Heritage has also documented exceptionally high-grade MS-67 full steps pieces, including a 2016 example described as having a PCGS population of 25 at the time, with none finer, and an earlier 2002 example described as a boldly struck, lustrous superb gem with needle-sharp steps. These records reveal the psychology behind advanced Jefferson nickel collecting. A specialist is not necessarily paying for the date itself. The collector is competing for a particular combination of grade, strike, surface quality, and registry-worthy status. It is also important to recognize what the verified data do not show. For the 1996 D specifically, the available records do not justify inventing a $4,000 normal market value or pretending that an ordinary coin can command such a figure. Exceptional prices must be supported by actual sales, and the documented 1996 D records currently available are much more restrained. That does not make the coin uninteresting. In fact, it makes the investigation more credible. A collector who understands that distinction can recognize the difference between a genuinely desirable certified specimen and an ordinary coin promoted online with an inflated claim. There is another question every serious examination should address. What exactly qualifies as a genuine error or variety? With a modern Jefferson nickel, unusual appearance is not enough. A raised line might be a die characteristic, a scratch or postment damage. Apparent doubling can result from mechanical doubling rather than a true doubled die. A distorted letter can be damaged after the coin entered circulation. Even a suspicious-looking mint mark should be treated cautiously because alteration is possible. The safest approach is to establish the coin's basic identity first: date, Denver mint mark, weight, diameter, edge, and overall design, before attempting a specialized attribution. A scale reading substantially different from the expected 5 grams can justify further investigation, but weight alone cannot prove authenticity because damaged or contaminated coins can also weigh incorrectly. Professional authentication becomes increasingly sensible when a coin appears unusually valuable, or when a claimed variety cannot be confidently matched to recognized diagnostics. Preservation is equally important. Never polish a promising nickel to make it brighter. Never scrub it with household cleaners, abrasive materials, or metal polish. Such treatment can leave hairlines, disturb the original surface, and destroy the very characteristics that a professional grader needs to evaluate. Store the coin in an inert, non-reactive holder, keep fingerprints away from the surfaces, and avoid excessive humidity or chemical exposure. Unlike copper cents, Jefferson nickels are not normally assigned the familiar brown, red-brown, or red color categories. Collectors instead consider natural toning, originality, luster, surface quality, and overall eye appeal. A faint golden or bluish tone is not automatically a problem, just as brilliant-looking surfaces are not automatically original. The 1996 D also has an important historical advantage from the collector's perspective. Because it is a relatively modern issue, many pieces were saved rather than destroyed or lost, making the top end of the population a study in quality rather than simple survival. PCGS's survival estimates for the full steps category illustrate this abundance, with hundreds of millions estimated to survive across grades. Consequently, the strongest premiums belong to exceptional certified examples rather than the date as a whole. And that brings us to the central lesson of the 1996 D. Jefferson nickel. The coin was born as a common 5-cent piece, struck in Denver in quantities exceeding 800 million, released into an economy where people expected to spend it rather than preserve it, and carried through ordinary commerce where contact marks and surface damage were almost inevitable. Yet the same manufacturing process created another possibility. A small number of pieces could emerge with unusually strong strikes, attractive luster, clean fields, and complete Monticello steps, and those survivors could later become targets for specialists assembling high-grade collections. The verified evidence shows how selective the market really is. An ordinary certified MS-63 example has a documented $184 auction result, while a certified full steps MS-65 reached $805. Those figures are not promises of current value, and they should never be applied to every 1996 D nickel. More recent auction evidence also shows why market conditions matter. A 1996 D MS-67 full steps PCGS example sold for $169 at Heritage in May 2024, while another MS-67 full steps example brought $94 in December 2025. Those differences demonstrate that certification alone does not guarantee a particular price. Population, grade, eye appeal, auction competition, timing, and the individual coin's quality all influence the final result. For someone examining a 1996 D today, the most useful habit is to slow down. Confirm the mint mark. Check the weight and edge. Study Jefferson's portrait for wear and contact marks. Watch the luster move across the fields. Inspect the lettering for abnormalities. Turn the coin over and examine Monticello, especially the steps. Look for genuine mint-made characteristics rather than damage created after the coin left Denver. If the coin appears exceptionally preserved, compare it with certified examples and consider professional authentication before assuming anything about its worth. There is no reliable basis for declaring every 1996 D nickel $1,000, $2,000, or $4,000 coin. The documented market simply does not support that claim. What it does support is something more interesting. This is a common modern nickel with a very real high-grade collecting market, and the difference between an ordinary survivor and an elite example can be enormous in numismatic terms. The 1996 D, therefore, rewards the collector who looks beyond the date and denomination and learns to read the evidence written into the metal itself. The next time one passes through your hands, the 5-cent denomination may be the least interesting thing about it.